mission work in Cambodia because it's a mission site that the church here supports, and I was told that would be okay. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move through it fairly quickly because I tend to not get through everything because I plan too much. But if you have a question about what's on the slide, please raise your hand, and I'll do my best to try to answer whatever questions you have. And if we get through it all and there's still some time left, I can answer other questions if you have about the mission work. Do I have to push this to get the screen up, or is it ready to roll? There are some embedded videos in here, and we just want to make sure they play properly as well and try to give you a sense more of what's going on by seeing and hearing people. Okay. Let's see if this works. So our congregation supports 3 foreign mission sites. We had a number of years ago supported 4 sites. Our annual congregational budget for foreign missions is $10,000, so each of the 4 sites used to get 2,500 Canadian. Since then, one of the sites hasn't needed the money anymore. They're more focused on building their people resources there, so the decision was made to keep the annual congregational budget for foreign missions at $10,000 and divide it between the 3 places that we help. One is Cambodia. One is Jeff Abrams is a brother who's done mission work in Ukraine for 40 years, and he's really focused on helping the church there during the war and helping Christians that have had to leave Ukraine because of the war. So that's the second. And then the third site is Vienna, Austria, where we support Gerhard, who's an Austrian and is leading an evangelistic effort there, primarily with people that have fled Iran and Afghanistan into Europe and come to Austria. And that's the main focus of his work. So today I'm just going to talk about Cambodia. So for 2026, this year, the church has provided $3,333, and I guess we could say 33 1/3 cents if we're dividing it right down, to the church in Cambodia. And then because we have these as regular works of the church, members can give targeted giving if they want to, towards these works. So members give into the general giving. Sometimes they'll give more and say, add this to what we send to Cambodia or Ukraine, etc. So it's $3,300 out of the budget plus whatever targeted giving individuals might give. Okay, what am I doing wrong here? Am I doing something wrong? Probably I am. Oh, I probably need to turn it on, do I? I bet that would help. Here we go. So one of the works is an orphanage, except Sokoma is not calling these kids orphans. He's calling them Jesus children. The site where his work comes out of is called Jesus Place. Now, actually, if you go on Google in Cambodia, that's what it shows up as. To make a long story short, this was not the plan to open an orphanage so quickly, but last year, through Sokom's contacts with other independent and denominational churches around Cambodia, there was an orphanage associated with a church that was having to close with 80 kids, and they didn't know what to do. And Sokom was in talks with the guy, and they decided just to take the kids in and they would make it work. So originally, they had the kids literally 3 high in bunk beds in small huts while they started massively building. So at this point now, they've built 3 houses like the 2 you see here on the screen, and the main floor is where the kids live with the house parents. The second floor, there are large classrooms, and the plan is to open a school, grade 1 to 3 to start, a Christian school, and then it'll expand to a grade 1 to 6. So they have the government approval for that starting this September. Right now, those classrooms on the second floor are used for the Sunday Bible school classes for the kids. In one of the houses on the second floor is a preparation room for the teachers, all the Bible school supplies. And in the second house is a big empty room that we turned into a library, which I'll talk about. So the first house that was built, I mean, Sokom designed it himself just on paper. He's not an architect, or just kind of did the best he could. and then got people involved building. It's not very expensive there because you're building with brick, clay bricks, and then just putting like a plaster over it. You don't need insulation, you don't need heating, obviously. As they've worked, his workers have learned how to do the vast majority of the work themselves. So one of these houses, I'm trying to remember, I think it's about the 2 floors together, it's over 5,000 square feet, I think. And on the main floor, there's 2 big rooms, so 12 boys on one side, 12 girls on the other. Room for the house parents to live in, their office, a big living room, Devo area, and then kitchen eating area. And then you've got almost the same square footage on the second floor. And they can build one of these houses now for under $100,000. So it's actually quite economical for putting these up. James chapter 1 verse 27 says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world." So I think he's really doing God's work by focusing on these kids. Some of them, their parents have died. They are true orphans. Some of them, their parents went to Thailand to work and left the kids in Cambodia. They may have gotten involved in the drug trade in Thailand, been arrested, convicted. They're put in prison in Thailand. And a lot of times their kids are with them in Thailand, and the Thai government sends them back to Cambodia. So that's created kids in Cambodia that don't have parents, although they have parents. There's also a lot of poverty, and that still goes back to the killing fields and the Khmer Rouge time in the late 1970s. So you have extended families where aunts and uncles or grandparents are trying to raise children. So all of that is where these kids come from. Really trying to give them a sense of joy and a sense of normalcy in this new family. It was tough when they all came, all 80 of them at first, because they didn't have a say in it. And they were uprooted and moved across the country out to this farm and didn't know anybody. So last year when I was there, they had only been there 3 months, and there was a lot of discipline issues, and there's a lot of problems. But they just weathered the storm and kept working through it. And I could see a huge difference this year at how the kids have settled in. They have every month a little barbecue and a birthday party for all the kids whose birthday is that month. So in January, these 7 kids, their birthday was that month. So they have a little cake for them, and then the kids are all involved. You see the teenage girls on this side doing some of the barbecuing and the cooking. So really trying to create a great sense of family amongst everybody. So this on the left is a shot of the back of one of the houses, and it's kind of the grounds in the area and just some tables that have been set up. And then a lot of the staff also involved, obviously, in the barbecue. On the property as well, Sukhum runs a Cambodia Bible School, which is a Bible training program for college-age kids or adults. Some of the men that are going through that will be preachers and have gone back, graduates, to their villages to preach. Others are just building their Bible knowledge, and they'll be good, they'll be great members in a church, basically. They're not necessarily going to go on to preach. So that's most of the people you're seeing sitting here. And you can see Catherine here, Linda Ross here, and just again, a real sense of joy and just kind of spending time together. What Sukhum has come to realize is that this has really turned out to be an evangelistic opportunity with these children. You are raising them in a Christian environment. They're experiencing Christian love. The church on site, that's where they go to church. They have Bible school classes. Every night in their dorm house, they have a devotional at 7 o'clock that's led by the college-age Bible school students. So the kids are really immersed in experiencing the love of God, and they're seeing as they're growing up that they're making the decision to become Christians. So really see this as a long-term evangelism. And if the school, once it gets opened, the goal is for it to be a grade 1 to 12 independent or Christian school. So they would be doing the regular Cambodian curriculum that's required by the government. Plus, because it's an independent school, the government allows you to have Christianity and Bible study as part of the regular school day, and then also English. And the hope is that these kids will, grow up to be really productive, mature Christian leaders in the country but then also in the congregations that they're part of. This picture on the left, that's one of the devos one evening. It is an isolated property. It's a farm way out in the country. And so one of the things we did is we bought a bunch of sports supplies, badminton rackets, soccer balls, those kinds of things, hula hoops and things for the kids to have just to be able to play and have some fun there as well. Because, they're surrounded by rice fields, there's not much there to do. And so the hula hoops were quite a hit with the kids. So their evening devotionals, as I mentioned, Monday to Friday night. So right now in the 2 houses, there's 40 kids in each house. So when the 3rd house opens and it's almost ready, they'll divide the 80 kids between the 3 houses. And that's going to get the houses down to more like the size they're designed for. They're designed for about 25 kids per house. But even with 40 kids in each house, every evening they have a devotional. And they involve the kids in this. So the kids are on a schedule where they get up and they lead a prayer, they lead singing, they read a scripture, different children. Usually it's the older teens, but even the preteen kids, because they're treating it as a family, as having a family devotional. One of the things they didn't have was songbooks. They had 1 or 2 per house, so the singing was, songs they remembered. So one of the things that we did is bought songbooks for the 2 houses, enough so that there's 1 songbook for 2 kids so they can sit and share. And this was the first night that they had them, and I was really happy to see them sitting together and cooperating and using the songbooks and singing together. Okay, so that's kind of just gives you a kind of an overview of what's going on with the orphans and those kids. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them a little bit later, but Catherine's main focus this trip was teacher training and doing a ladies' class. Last year when we were there with Linda and Catherine and I, a year ago, Sunday morning, all 80 kids were in one class. And the lady that teaches them English, who's a Cambodian lady, was trying to teach 80 kids from 5 years old to 18 in one class on Sunday. It was just pandemonium, really. So last year we worked with them about how to teach kids, how 6-year-olds you teach differently than a 10-year-old, than a 17-year-old. We divided them by age into 3 classes last year, trained the college students on how to teach kids, got them teaching, and then we left. We go back this year, and they've regressed right back to what they were doing before. They had them in 3 classes, not 1, but the teachers had regressed to just standing and basically talking to the kids, even having a stick and using a stick for discipline, and we got rid of that in a hurry, and just kind of went back to reinforcing again how you teach, what you teach. So, Catherine showed them some very simple crafts ideas, cutting out paper dolls and gluing them on a larger piece of paper, and this is the 12 apostles, and you can do this craft when you teach the kids, and they can write the names on the paper. And, activity. Kids learn by doing, they won't just sit and listen like adults. So you can see one of the teachers here, Lekana, and she's in the class learning about how to teach, and then the next Sunday here she is, and she's using the felt board, and she's got the kids up with pictures, putting them up and talking. So we saw a lot of progress again, and by the time I left, they were back to where they were a year ago and even further with what they're doing with the kids, right? And Linda is there till the end of June, so she goes to their classes every Sunday, watches, and then on Monday meets with them and gives them lots of praise for what they're doing and helps just fine-tune again how to do even better. Because there's very, very little material in their language. So, you can go on a website that's English and use Google Translate, but, it's not very accurate. So it's hard for them to access, material. Nothing's ready for them. They have to make it all themselves. So that's part of the challenge. And then Catherine was teaching a ladies' class as well, from the college-age ladies. Plus, there are a number of families that live on the farm that are helping run the farm, and husbands and wives. And so in the evening, I think it's 5 to 6, Catherine, or 5 to 7, was doing a class with the ladies just getting them used to getting together, reading the scriptures together, discussing them, having a prayer together, sharing with each other about their lives, and being an encouragement to each other. So here's one of the teachers, on a Saturday in the teacher prep room, getting her material ready for the next day. She was going to be teaching about Joseph and his multicolored coat. I was really happy to see that, because when we got there, Sunday morning, they were all running around like chickens with their heads cut off, just grabbing anything to teach with, no preparation. So to see them working days ahead, getting themselves ready, was really encouraging. And they saw the difference it made for the kids. One of the teachers created out of these plastic cups, slicing it, and then using plastic weaving and making a basket, and then making a fish out of colored paper, and then having the kids do that and use that in teaching Jesus feeding the 5,000. And she'd made some simple bread, so they also sat and had a little snack together. So really seeing great progress with the kind of learning that the kids are getting. And Linda, who many of you know. Linda was an EA, an educational assistant for years, and also has taught in Bible school programs, I think since Noah's kids were in them. And don't tell her I said that. And she's excellent at teaching, and teaching English, how to teach English. So we found a source there in Phnom Penh where we could buy leveled readers for teaching English, phonics, level 1 books, level 2, 3, all the way up from someone that can read nothing. And so what she does is the kids get an English class every day with their Khmer English teacher, and she's got a group of students, but she'll pick 1 or 2 that maybe are weaker and send them to Linda. And then Linda does real targeted one-on-one with them to help catch them up to where they are with the rest of their class. Because English will be a huge asset to these kids as they grow up, in their futures. So that's what Linda is doing. So every morning she starts at 8 and basically teaches kids all morning, has a lunch break, and then all afternoon working with them. So she's got a little record system, and she's working with all 80 of the kids. Last year when we were there, we had talked to Sakum about how could we help with a project? What would be the most use? One of the things that could be the most use for him. And he talked about the school, and the one big open room talked about, it'd be nice to have a library, because books and reading is not part of the culture there. Yes, rich kids in the city whose parents send them to foreign-run schools, those schools have libraries and they teach reading. But in general, in the rural areas and things, kids would not have books at home. Parents don't read to their children. There's no libraries in the schools. Many parents can't read. The literacy is still pretty high. So helping these kids learn how to read, not just English, but Khmer, their own language, building a culture of reading is really important, especially if we want people as Christians reading the Bible on their own, right? Not just coming to church and having someone teach them, but reading themselves. So we took on the task of helping do this library. When we came, that was an empty room, basically. It's on the second floor of one of the houses. So we worked with them to map out the size of the room, how many shelves, where we would buy shelves, all of that kind of stuff. And then myself and Visal, who's one of the workers who focuses the school and the orphanage, we made probably 6 or 7 trips back into Phnom Penh, the capital, an hour and a half away. Went to publishers, not just bookstores, to see what books were available and buy books. And then bring them out, put them all in plastic like you would do in a library to protect them, cataloged them all. So what we've set up is this area here, these books all are bilingual. They have Khmer and English in them. So one of the kids could read the Khmer, and then they're going to understand the story, and then they could look at the English and use that to help them to learn English as well. These ones here are all just English books. Lots of pictures and things, so even if they can't read every word, it's going to get them into using books and looking and starting to learn. Then where this picture was taken, if you turn around, there's the other half of the room. And then these books here and these ones over here are all just in Khmer. And so we really tried to cover all 3 of those so that get the kids reading. And then also here, we've bought some jigsaw puzzles and some other simple games that they can come into the library and use just to build cooperation and play amongst the kids too. Then we worked with Vissal, who works with the orphans, and he talked to some of the older teens. And the older teens, we trained them to be the librarians. And they set up a schedule. So over the week, all 80 kids have a scheduled time in a group of about 8 to come to the library for an hour. The teenage librarian is on duty and then, oversees, supervises, helps them. They sign out books. They make a record of the books they've taken and then bring the books back. And then if it's not your time in the week, but you don't have anything to do, they're welcome to go up. And if the library's not full, the librarians will say, sure, you can just join us as well. So we're trying that, and they're gonna see how it goes, and they'll adapt it as along the way. But this just warmed my heart. This was the first day we were officially open, and the kids were coming in, and this little girl sitting reading. Lui Fang here, he was so proud. He had just finished putting this jigsaw puzzle together. And it was very interesting watching. Like Catherine said, it was clear some of these kids had never seen a jigsaw puzzle. We all would take that puzzle, find the 4 corner pieces, right? Find all the edge pieces. No concept. So just very, very new for them to have things like this to play with and to learn. This is Moni, who's one of the librarians, sitting reading with one of the boys, whose language skills aren't strong enough to read Khmer, but so Moni was sitting with him reading together. And I thought that's just fabulous. And I think they're going to try to do more of that in the future of, when the kids are in their houses, about 30 per house, there's a range of 5-year-olds to 19 in the house. So they're thinking of also having some time where maybe the 5 oldest teens bring the 5 youngest kids in the house to the library together, pick a book together, and sit and read. And we also bought a lot of, there is a Christian bookstore in Phnom Penh, and we bought as many Christian books as we could, Bible stories, so they can be using those as well. Now we'll see if this works. The right-hand side is a video, and we'll see if it plays. What happened? They're just figuring it out. Don't worry about the audio if it won't play. You can play it without the audio, Josh, that's okay. Maybe when we do another one, I don't know if you can just hold a microphone, because I can hear it on your laptop at the speaker for the next video. Maybe we can try that. Okay. So Sunday afternoon, February 14th, a number of the kids came to Sukhum and said they wanted to be baptized. They had talked to their house parents, and then the house parents brought them to Sukhum. So we spent about an hour and a half that afternoon just sitting and talking with them, getting them to explain what they thought baptism was, why they wanted to be baptized, those kinds of questions. A lot of these kids had been in different denominational house churches, was where they had come from around the country. And some of them said, when I was 6, my parents had the pastor baptize me, but now I've realized that I didn't have a clue what that meant, what it was about. They've been here now for a year and a half learning, reading the Bible, going to classes, and they're making their own connections and seeing things. So nobody's forcing them, but they're around the Bible and learning and hearing things and coming to their own conclusions. A couple of the kids, the older ones, Sukhum talked to them, they realized they had been scripturally baptized. They were older, they knew they had sinned, they wanted forgiveness, they were baptized by immersion, so he said, I don't think you need to be baptized again. He said, if it still bothers you, though, you can, but they decided no, they just reassured them that they were saved. But the other kids, they decided that they wanted to be baptized. So that was Sunday afternoon. So that evening, 19 of them were baptized. The two guys that conducted their baptisms, Soka and Ron, they're two of the preaching school grads that are living at the property and working, and they're the ones that coordinate the devos every night with the teens. So they've had a real hand in teaching and spending good time with these kids. This fellow on the left, Dia, he's actually not one of the orphans. He's Sukum's nephew's son, who 16, didn't really like going to school much anymore, and his parents were at wit's end, and so Sukum said, well, send him here. He can come live with me, and he's actually working, learning a trade at the farm, and coming to church and learning, and he decided that he had wanted to be baptized as well. Now I'm going to try this again. On the left is a video which will show you just some singing around the baptistry. This was Sunday evening, kind of the atmosphere before we conducted their baptisms. Great. And then that night they had their first communion, because in the morning they hadn't, because they weren't Christians, they weren't saved. And so in that evening they served communion to them as a group. And those are the kids. March 1st, 9 more of the kids wanted to be baptized. And it was interesting. We again sat and talked and studied with them. So it was about 3 weeks after the first group, and they said after the first group was baptized, it really got them thinking about themselves and what had they done and why. And so they made the decision as well to be baptized on that Sunday. So one of the things we did is we made some snacks for them, some popcorn and stuff to have a little party celebration after. One of the things Sukum does is raises coconuts. And so the guys went out and gathered 90 coconuts, and you see this machete here. I don't know how they cut the top off without losing fingers, but they do. And then you put a straw in it, and the cold coconut water inside is really delicious. So that's what we did after the baptism, kind of have a little celebration. And those are the kids that were baptized that night. So it's really showing that the orphanage has got great potential as far as evangelism goes. And I'm going to have to pick up the pace here. I've got 15 minutes left. So part of what Sukum and I did is we did a evangelistic trip into Vietnam. Cambodia and Vietnam share a very long border. And this was 100% funded by you guys, by this congregation. This trip, he has no money to do something like this. His regular funds that come from his sponsoring congregations help with the orphanage, the Bible college, that kind of thing. So the only reason this trip could happen is because of the donations from here. So we went for about 8 days. A little history. These lower provinces here, marked in red, that is now part of Vietnam. But up until 1949, that was Cambodia. This was part of Cambodia. And in 1949, France was the European country that was colonizing this area, and they were trying to make South Vietnam stronger against the communist North. So they basically took all that land that was Cambodia and gave it to Vietnam. So all the Cambodian people that were living there overnight got transferred to Vietnam. So you have a few million Khmer people, which is what Cambodian people are, that's the tribe, Khmer people who now are living in Vietnam. And that's not their country, but that's where they are. They're really treated as second-class citizens in Vietnam. And so that's where we went, because they're the same people as people in Cambodia, right? They're Khmer people. So Sukum has an automatic connection to them. This lady here is the reason we ended up getting to go there. And I just think it's really interesting to see how God works. So last summer, Sukum did a seminar on his property for church leaders around Cambodia to come and just study the Bible for 2 days from all kinds of churches. And so people came, and this young couple came. And then fast forward to January 2026, Sukum is going to do a medical mission around Cambodia where they gather some doctors and they travel to villages, provide medical care and free Bible studies. So he reaches out to one of this couple that had come to his property in August and said, could we come to your village to do this medical outreach, because you have to work with someone local and get government permission and all this kind of stuff. And this young lady and her husband said, sure, that would be great. She contacts her aunt, Julie, who lives in Vietnam, who's Cambodian, and says, you need to come back and meet this guy. He's coming to this medical mission in our village, and I think you'd really find him interesting. So Julie comes back to Cambodia in January and meets Sukhum. And she is very interested in just studying the Bible, just learning from the Bible. She herself kind of came out of a denominational background. So that's where they met. And so she was the one that then set up everything for us back in Vietnam, because she knows so many people and so many church leaders. So, you can kind of see the thread of how God worked back over a year ago, kind of putting people together. Her husband, by the way, is Sopan, is quite a young Christian. I think her first husband passed away a few years ago and she remarried. He was, before he became a Christian through her, he was a Buddhist monk. And not just a Buddhist monk, but quite a high priest in the Buddhist religion, where he trained other monks. And so he's looking at coming to Sukhum's to study in the Bible school and learn, but he'd also be a great resource for Sukhum's preaching students to really understand Buddhism and how do you reach somebody with Christianity who has grown up in Buddhism, because that's his story. So our original contacts with Julie were with some pretty large churches like this one in Vietnam. This fellow here is the head pastor for that church, and very friendly, but it became clear that there wasn't a lot of openness there. He's very entrenched, being part of a denominational group, something called Christian Missionary Alliance. But this guy here, Ning, is one of the deacons in that church, and he proved to be quite open. So the next day, we visited 5 rural churches with this pastor and kind of saw things. This picture on the left is the front of the church building. The right there is the road that it's on, so you can see it's very rural. And we had brought a gift of some rice and cooking oil and basic staples for some of the poorer families, which is kind of a cultural thing that you do. So he talked to them for a bit. He had Sukhum talk to them, and then a number of people had come forward that he had been teaching, and he asked Sukhum to place his hands on them and call upon God's Spirit to enter them. And Sukhum had to say, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Kind of explained to this pastor, my understanding of the Bible is this is how God's Spirit enters you when you're baptized. But he said, I'll definitely pray for them in their continued growth. Well, that kind of ended our partnership with this guy. We found out from Nang, the deacon, that night he called a meeting with himself and the deacons about, I didn't know these people from Cambodia didn't teach like us and whatever. But Nang then contacted Sukhum the next day, the deacon, and he wanted to get together. And they got together, and he said, so he's the one that told Sukhum about this meeting with their head pastor. And he said, but he didn't share any scripture. And Nang said, I went home and I looked at all the verses you shared with us about when the person gets the Holy Spirit, and it's really clear. The head pastor was talking about our rule book, how you have to study for 90 days before you get baptized. And I don't see that in the Bible, how we have to order special baptismal clothes, and I don't see that in the Bible. And so this guy became kind of our main contact, and then through him, he took us to other churches that were more open-minded, that weren't under the control of kind of the central group. So this is a small independent church that we went to visit. It took this church 20 years to get their permission from the government to be allowed to meet. That's how strict it is and controlling in Vietnam. But they had Sukhum and I both speak, and then a number of people that they had already been reaching out to responded. Very similar, to when we used to have a lectureship and you have a guest speaker come, right? It generates some excitement in a church, especially a foreigner. In 10 days there, I didn't see one other white person in this area of Vietnam where we were. So I was a bit of a novelty, I was like, the guy can stand on the street corner with one of those organ grinders and play music and no one will stop. But if he's got a trained monkey, that's interesting, so people will stop. I was kind of the monkey, right? that attracts the attention, and then they'll listen to the message. So Kum talked to them all about, this decision that they were making. Julie talked to a lot of the ladies in depth about what they were deciding to do. This is their pastor, or their evangelist, and he's talking to them all. I suggested that they go through Romans 6 together, so he got out his Bible on his phone and was studying with them, so they really understood the decision they were making. Their other evangelist, this fellow, sat with this lady and said, well, if you're making this decision to become a Christian, these amulet bracelets that you had the Buddhist priest bless that are supposed to protect you from evil spirits, you have to renounce that. It's Jesus only. And so she cut them off and gave them away. That was it for her. The head evangelist here, he was talking to each person, making sure he had their phone number, address, contact, so he could keep following up with them and make sure they really became part of the congregation. And then they don't have a baptistry, so you get on your motorbikes and you head off to the Mekong River. And they were all baptized in the Mekong on February 23rd. Sukhum has 3 doctors that work with him, and they come along on these trips. They bring a general pharmacy of medicine, and they'll see each person that wants to see a doctor, seeing a GP, and talk with them, and they might prescribe certain things. They take reading glasses, do a simple reading test, eye reading test to give reading glasses to people. And then again, some rice and some cooking oil and some basic staples, because a lot of the people are extremely poor. But this help is given to everybody that wants it. It's not tied to being baptized or showing interest. You're just helping to show the love of God with people. One of the things this evangelist is doing, because so many people don't read, is buying these very inexpensive recorders, recording the Bible or sermons, and then giving these to people so they can sit at home at least and listen to the Bible or listen to a lesson. So Sukhum and him are talking about trying to partner, doing a little bit more of that together. Then the deacon that I talked about that really changed what he believed and was really wanting just to follow the Bible, he took us out to his family's home, which was in the middle of nowhere. The middle of nowhere. That's his mom and dad's little house. And this is the road. The road is actually being torn up and worked on, so we got to a certain point and you couldn't drive anymore, so we had to abandon our car and walk to get into this place. And I just show you, you'll see here, it's just a collection of houses, and all the people here are farmers, so all around it are coconut fields and rice fields. And that's his parents' house there. So we were off the grid, I think it would be safe to say. But he's been reaching out to his family for 12 years about what it is to be a Christian. He was an alcoholic and just on the streets at one point in his life. And coming in contact with a church, albeit a denominational church, really helped clean up his life and turn his life around. And I think God's really used this trip to open his eyes to just what the gospel really is. And so he wanted us to meet his family, and his parents were there. They had gathered some of the other villagers, and so we sat and had a Bible study for a large part of the day. That's Ning there. And then his mom and dad and a number of the villagers wanted to be baptized. And he's been reaching out to them for 12 years, so Ning was just thrilled. But where do you baptize somebody? There was a little creek there, but the pig pens and the cow sheds were built right on it. So we weren't too thrilled about getting down into that water. So this is what you do. You head off to the local store, I don't know how far away it was, and you come back with a big bucket. And then you baptize people. This lady, a very interesting story. She couldn't speak. She had something wrong with her. She could make sounds but not speak. And she'd been told that it was because the evil spirits had possessed her. And it's because she'd done something wrong in her previous life, and she was paying for it in this life. And if she suffers enough, she'll have a better next life. And she had those blessed red thread, amulet, bracelets, and necklace on. And at first, she did not want to be baptized. She wasn't going to change. She wasn't going to give any of this up. And so they said, no problem. Now, some of the other ladies in the village were trying to pressure her, and Ning said, no, this is her. But then later, she decided she wanted to. And I mean, I don't know if you can see the anguish on her face there, but he is making it with her. He's saying, you sure you want me to cut this off? That's that necklace that's supposed to protect her. And then look at the difference here. There's the joy as she was baptized. And Sakum baptized his shoes too at the same time. So if someone tells you, no, baptism by immersion is not really possible because there's not water everywhere, that's not true. If you really want to do it, you can. And that is Ning with his dad and then his mom. And then we had a meal in their kitchen. I'm going to have to speed up here to get through everything, but this is in his backyard. They harvest coconut trees, and these trees are really tall. And he's got a long bamboo stick with a knife at the end, and he's basically cutting a couple of them down. Okay, so the last real church we visited in Vietnam was this one. This is the church on this side, and this is the house where the family lives that hosts this church on this side. Here's church members arriving in the torrential rain on their bikes. This family, again, it's illegal. They don't have permission yet officially to meet, so they have to be really discreet. So it's just the living room, what would be the living room of this little house is where the church meets. And this was the worship service that we were part of here. Their minister conducting it, and then these are the members here. And I mean, I can't tell you what it meant to them for us to come, and show interest in them and be there to worship with them. Because it's a tough road that they're hoeing, right? These people are very, very poor. They're they're coming 30 kilometers away on those little bikes to get to church. They're all subsistence farmers. They have to meet underground because it's illegal. So it's tough. And so part of what we did was just try to encourage people like this. And Ning, who we had been working with, he kind of picked the congregations that he thought we could be the most encouragement to. I thought, so that's their house across the street. And I went across into it to use the bathroom. And you can see here, those 3 mats would be where they sleep. This is their kitchen. And then out the back, there isn't even really a wall. There's a canal and their boat, because so much happens on the water here. That little pen is fish that they're raising, and then beside it is frogs that they're raising for food. And out of that came a delicious meal that we had together with them before we left. And Sakum is really good. He'll lean over to me and he'll say, you can eat that one and that one, but don't eat that one. Because he knows I can get sick pretty easily. Last thing I want to mention, and I'll race through this fast, is we also did 2 Bible seminars in Cambodia. So after we came back from Vietnam, we went to one village area for 2 days and another village area. And again, this trip 100% funded by this congregation. Sakum does not have money to do this. So he reached out through people he knew, and we went to 2 churches. Now this is why. I wish I could tell you this whole story, I can't, so I'll just give you the stats. In rural churches in Cambodia, church leaders, 90% of them are rice farmers that conduct worship on Sunday. They're just rice farmers, working all day, and then Sunday, whoever is interested comes to their house and they have a little worship service. They're not preachers. They have no training, no education. When they surveyed them recently, 12% of them said they've read the Bible cover to cover at least once. So that means 82% of these church leaders have never read the whole Bible. 18% of them said they prepared their sermon based on a Bible passage. Well, what do the other 72% prepare their sermons on, or 82, whatever that is? 73% use only social media to prepare a message. So they look at YouTube or somewhere where someone else has a message. And they may sometimes read the related Bible passage. May sometimes. The average amount of time spent reading the Bible each day is 7 minutes. That's church leaders that were surveyed. So Sukum offers to go and do a 2-day Bible seminar. And we're just going to study the Bible. What does the Bible teach? And the church leaders come because they're very eager to learn. So this was a very rural farm church near the border with Thailand. Some of their members had to evacuate in the recent war with Thailand. The one family, their farm was bombed. So these people, now it's stable there, but it's, they're dealing with that kind of need as well in their area. The lady here in black, she's the one that runs this farm. Her husband died during COVID. She has 7 kids, so she's trying to keep this farm going, and the church that meets at her property trying to help keep it going as well. So this was the first day there, and some of the church leaders from the surrounding areas that had come, and we conducted a 2-day Bible seminar for them. She raises crickets, so that's roasted crickets on the left. And on the right is, it's chicken and stir-fried vegetables and things. So they always put a meal on for you and are really gracious. The second place we did the seminar in was in a village, so it's more like a little town. Again, it was put on for church leaders. So there's Sukum speaking to this group of church leaders. And they asked things like, what does the Bible say about worship? What should we be doing in our worship? And so we just asked questions of what do you do now? And talked about what they do and what they don't do. And do you take the Lord's Supper? Yeah, we do that once a month. Well, why do you do that once a month? Well, it takes a lot of time and it's kind of blah, blah. So we said, well, how about if we just sing once a month? What do you think? And they all laughed, right? Or what if we only took a collection once a month? And we're like, well, why do we view this one differently? And just, so he's not shy about pointing out what the Bible teaches because they've said they want to know, but you also have to be respectful and gentle, right? You can't go in guns blazing and try to fix everything or tell everybody everything they're doing is wrong, or you'll never be invited back. So it's very careful, and a lot of it is built on the relationship. And that although we might see things differently right now, we both respect each other, care for each other. We're all in this journey to try to understand what the Bible teaches, is kind of the approach. 2 passages that I think kind of summarize this, and then we'll stop. Acts 13, Paul is in Antioch, Pisidia, the province of Pisidia. So when the Jews went out of the synagogue, the Gentiles begged that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. Now when the congregation had broken up, many of the Jews and devout proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. On the next Sabbath, almost the whole city came together to hear the word of God. And I think we see Paul, who is from a Jewish background and has a reputation as a Jewish scholar, using that as his in. And he's going to synagogues and teaching. Acts 17, Paul's in Berea. When they arrived, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. These were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, and they received the word with all readiness, searched the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. Therefore, many of them believed, and also not a few of the Greeks, prominent women. I'll just mention this one. You can, we're out of time, look it up for yourself. But it's, Aquila and Priscilla going and learning from Apollos and then taking him aside discreetly and showing him some things that he didn't understand properly and helping him to understand. And that comes from, that's evangelism, but that comes by you have to be open to first get together with people and meet them, respect where they're at, and work positively with them. And that turns into then the church providing letters of recommendation for Apollos as he goes somewhere else. My last Sunday, I just love this picture. It's their tradition, their culture. You leave your shoes outside the door before you go into a building, even the church building. So when you walk up to the church, the doorway's everybody's shoes, and then everybody's inside. And that's the congregation at Sukum's. And just thought you'd like to hear this. Some of the lessons I think we can learn for ourselves in evangelism is just get busy. God will use your efforts, mistakes and all. So Combs very honest about the things he's tried that have failed or didn't go well but led to something else. If we're just busy, God can use us. And we have to be open to unexpected opportunities. For example, like I explained about the orphans, that wasn't a planned thing. Relationships and our reputation with people, with non-Christians, that's key. And that's, goes back to Julie's niece first being impressed, inviting her aunt over, which led to the trip into Vietnam, right? And we need to trust God's timeline. When Sukum and I went to Vietnam 3 years ago, the different area we went to, no one was open, nothing really came out of that. But you don't quit, you don't give up, you keep trying, you try something else, and you leave time for God to work as well. So important that we meet people where they are at, right? And we ask, what needs do people have that we can meet? Because that is part of it as well. Matthew 9:35, Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. And so when we touch people's hearts, that there can be an openness there to the gospel. So I hope you feel encouraged, because as I mentioned, the outreach to those 2 villages in Cambodia and all the outreach in Vietnam, that was because of the funds that the congregation here sent. It wouldn't have happened without that. So Sukum asked me to really thank you for that, and to tell you that from those 2 villages, since I came back, 5 other different village church leaders have reached out to him and said, we heard about this Bible seminar you did. Could you come to my village next? So there's more opportunity. And again, that's thanks to your support. Okay, I apologize for going over a bit, but we'll stop there. We'll have a few minutes till we worship.